Hey, everybody. Welcome. Glad you are here today. I'm Sarah Maris. I'm the Senior Manager of Technical Learning Content Development at Udacity. And we're here today to talk about basically the key thing in 2025, Agentic AI. And we're here with some pretty amazing guests who are going to help us work our way through it. So let me start. Our first panelist is Noble Ackerson, and Noble is a Google developer expert in artificial AI and the lead instructor behind our Udacity Agentic AI Fluency course. He is also, you may also know Noble from our AI product manager nanodegree program. And he has a career that spans enterprise AI strategy, generative systems, responsible AI practices. He helps organizations transform human AI interactions from clunky prompts into transparent and explainable agentic workflows. And he's got some hot takes on what AI agents can and cannot do. Similarly, we have another one of our awesome Udacity authors, Brian Cruz. Brian leads the AI engineering at Advocate, where generative AI is used to help individuals with disabilities apply for benefits. He previously held positions at Samba TV, and he contributes significantly to advancements in AI for edge devices, as well as at Salesforce, where he led ML engineering for sales revenue forecasting. He's created several Udacity courses, including our AIoT Foundations, our Generative AI Foundations, and our upcoming course on prompting for AI agents. So I think we're going to have an interesting discussion ahead of us today. And I'm glad you're all here. So let's start by defining the landscape. Noble, for those who are new to Agentic AI, how do you define it in plain language, and what makes it different from traditional AI?
The key difference is that traditional AI essentially just answers questions, whereas agentic AI, I guess, pursues objectives in the non. I guess I don't want to humanize what it's trying to do, but it basically can break down complex goals, try different approaches, and keep things going when, and know when to break when things don't go as expected, if architected properly.
Okay, great. Okay, so Brian, now can you share some examples of how AI agents are being used?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Aaron. And I think this will be something we'll be talking about today when working with AI agents. So they actually might sound like a new thing. If you're in 2025, like all of us are, you hear agents everywhere, but they're actually not a new thing. So we've seen AI agents in a load of technologies, especially Internet of Things. So if you think of thermostats, even think of doorbells that a lot of people have, they have AI in them and they're interacting with the world. Really visibly, we see agents on our streets. We have cars that over the years have more and more become their own agents, and they've exhibited more agency. So we actually have driverless cars now. But recently, I think one of the things that's really exciting for a lot of us, just because it looks cool, is we've seen AI agents be used in terms of creating content, coding, education. Something that's that I work with a lot is understanding loads and loads of unstructured data in all sorts of industries. You may have even seen chatbots coming up in a lot of places. For instance, in a banking app, in my opinion, a lot of that needs a lot more work. But that's where I've seen agents.
Okay, great. And great, we kind of got ahead on debunking one of the myths about agentic AI, that it's something brand new in 2025. It's not, right? To your point, we've been seeing agents for a while. We just haven't been as excited, and they haven't been necessarily as visible as they are right now. Okay, so Noble, let's talk some other myths and misconceptions. Give us one of the misconceptions, the biggest misconceptions you hear about agentic AI.
So if you've been listening to the news lately, you've probably heard that, these systems are going to get intelligent to the point where they're essentially fully autonomous, right? That you can unleash them within your workforce, and before you know it, there's going to be mass, I believe they called it a bloodbath in the industry, if I were to use that quote from a certain CEO recently. But that's dangerous, right? It's not wrong. It's not just wrong. It's not even how we should even frame these things. And I believe that's sort of the first misconception. I'll give you a practical example. I work for the federal government. And what I've learned is that the most effective agents are designed for human computer collaboration or human AI collaboration. The agent handles, say, routine analysis in some use cases where you have like a bunch of log entries or something like that needs to parse through. Might check standard procedures, but then it might escalate to a human for judgment, given the fact that the world is dynamic, the world is weird. Things are not static in a way that, and things can arise in an emergent way. So security decisions can pop out of nowhere that, if not generalized for your what your agent is grounded on, could lead it to a path that could cause harm to humans, right? So think about it this way. You wouldn't hire an employee at your company and give them zero oversight. Why would you do that for a machine? The best frameworks that I've used, I'm a Google developers expert, so I use Google's agent developer kit. There's LangGraph. A lot of those tools are architected around what they call a human in the loop design. And that's a feature. So I'll just sort of end it with sort of a quippy take in sort of a question, in that if we are designing these agents to help us achieve our goals, whether it be on the commercial side or maybe just a personal interaction with it, and we're unleashing the technology to sort of help us, be better humans, how do we know if the agent has achieved it if there aren't humans in the loop? So that's sort of my intellectual argument against the myth that these things are fully autonomous.
Okay. Brian, let's ask you the same question. What's a common myth you see in your work?
Yeah, here's a big one that I see everywhere, actually. Using AI agents will instantly give you return on investment and make you more efficient. So first of all, for something to be efficient, you have to get something back, right? So when you talk about gasoline efficiency in a car, it's miles per gallon. You have to be going somewhere for the number of gallons you're putting in. And so AI agents are a new technology. It's going to take time for humans, just like any other technology, to get right, both as makers of the technology and also users of the technology. And this learning how to make it and learning how to use it takes both time and money. So if you're going to use agents, get ready to make that investment, right? And also get ready to get it wrong before you get it right. This is like any other technology. And I think it's easy to go for the shiny object and say, this is what we need. But I think this leads to another myth I want to bring up, is that using AI agents will help you reach your business goals automatically. Focusing on and measuring your progress on reaching your goals, whether they're business goals or personal goals, is what helps you reach those goals. So Agentic AI, it's a tool. You can ask ChatGPT to research websites on helping you. I need a plan to run a marathon in the next 6 months based on my calendar schedule. And here's some events I have. Can you work around that? And so it can create a plan for you, right? And it might actually be a good plan. The thing is, it won't do the running for you. And so to actually be able to do it, you're going to have to do the running. So that's that. I'd say that's the other thing. It won't help you reach your goals automatically.
Oh, you almost had me there with running the marathon. Boy, if I
Not
could
yet.
run a marathon for that'd be great. Okay. Now, for both of you, is there a myth or misconception that you see repeated so often that you think it might be holding back adoption or innovation? What do you think?
I I guess I'll go first on that one. I think the notion that you can, again, just to echo that first part of my question, that you can sort of just roll it out in your environment, and you too may have your own open AI within your finance department, is kind of misguided, and I think sort of detracts from what the technology at this stage in its growth. Um, these In order to get this utopian space where you have agents running around in your organization or at home or in your car, or your car is driving you around, you need data. You need a lot of it. You need good quality. You need consistent evaluations and error analysis to make sure that data product is actually going to feed the right context to this robot or this agent. And in order to feed it to the robot, you need the right harnesses, the pipelines, the guardrails, and that's often overlooked. And of course, once you solve that problem, you have this little human factors thing that kind of matters, where one, adoption is a user experience issue. It is a breadth of functionality issue, meaning how is this agent solving a problem that I always had 10x better than a non-AI or non-agentic way to solve it. There's also regulations. There's on and on and on. And so across the stack, I often run into, when I used to sit in board meetings and stuff like that, you run into certain claims that are made that you have to quickly check and sort of bring back down to earth. That in order to get to at least the part where you have pipelines sort of funneling the right context to an agent, that you have the right data, that you have the right people within your organization that can actually create the right context for these agents. And I think that's often not considered. The complexity, the more reliable and performant we require these agents to have, the more cost and complexity grows.
Okay. How about you, Brian? What's your take on that? What myths are you hearing that are kind of holding back innovation?
Yeah, so I'll sort of double down on that in terms of a misunderstanding of the complexity of solving the problems we have in front of us. And so one of the things that AI agents have allowed us to do pretty quickly and amazingly is come up with really cool prototypes of a lot of things. People are making apps, video games, websites in ways we haven't done before. And there are people who haven't even coded before that are picking up these tools and getting inspired. And I think that's really cool, especially from an educational point of view. When a student is inspired to create something new, I think that's great. And that's something we have to tap into. That's one level. And but going from prototype to production, especially when you're dealing with people's, let's say, protected health information, or you're dealing with people's money, or people's livelihoods, that's something else. That does require going through the data sets, as Noble mentions, making sure you're getting it right, making sure you understand the problem, and that whatever code you're making, whatever agents you're making, have a level of performance that you can vouch for. Like Noble said, you just wouldn't, let one of these agents off loose without really checking in to see how it's doing. And you need to check in before you put it into production and while it's in production. And so I think a lot of people are seeing these new tools and these new capabilities and thinking, oh, I can release this in a week. I can release this in 2 weeks. You can get a prototype in a week, maybe even a day now, but the real product still requires getting deep into the weeds and understanding the data and understanding your use cases and making sure that you're doing it right.
Okay, so here's a tell me if this is a myth or not, because what I'm hearing you guys saying is that getting this right is pretty complex, right? You need to kind of make sure you've got the right data, you make sure it's answering the right question, you make sure you're doing the right work. So is it true then that AI agents are only for people who have a lot of deep AI understanding? Like who are AI agents for? Like, you know, who can actually kind of work with this technology? Who can learn to work with this technology?
Brian, you want to go or
Yeah,
I? Go ahead.
just real quickly, from the educational point of view, I think it's for everyone.
Okay.
Everyone needs to learn how to use this technology and learn it at a deep level, understand how large language models work, what they can do, what they can't do. They're actually more capable than they were a few months ago, but there are a lot of things they still cannot do, and and a lot of times, a lot of the marketing material says you need to use this, and it'll sort of ignore what really needs to happen. And I think that's something we want to emphasize here. One of the myths is actually there's still a lot of work here that needs to be done. Let's show you the type of work that you need to do to go from beginner to intermediate to advanced use of agents.
Okay, so let's dig into that some more. So Noble, for AI, machine learning professionals, developers, product managers in our audience, what skills are the most critical to work with agentic AI effectively?
Um, so I would say there are three critical skills that just sort of jump out at me. One is workflow thinking,
Okay.
which means you need to see the business process as a decomposable system, basically meaning breaking down complex goals into agent-ready steps, identifying decision points, mapping tool integrations. It's part of a business analysis, part of systems design. So workflow thinking is an important one and something that I cover in an upcoming agentic fluency course, hopefully soon. And then the second one would be, context architecture. You'll hear the word context a lot. There's an entire protocol from Anthropic around model context protocol that is just, um, you know, how we teach these agents about the world that we live in. So agents are essentially only as good as the information that they have at each step of their process, right? So context architecture means, designing how context flows through multiple steps, in just controlling what the agent remembers versus what it forgets and when it needs to, rage quit and access external data, for example. And so that's context architecture. And then I promised three. The third one is human interface design, because what's the point of all this fancy stuff if we're being promised AGI or ASI and we're still interacting it with a text-based chatbot type interface? It just makes no sense. So um, the for me, human AI interface design means a couple things. It could also mean, when does the agent escalate? How does the agent review its work? What effective oversight? What does effective oversight look like? And it's not just UX design. It's sort of, I would call it operational thinking. And then I want to sort of add to that human AI interface design. Back in the day before generative AI, like, changed the world that we live in, traditional or predictive AI practitioners or data scientists had something we called, for smaller models, we called it explainable AI. I think that is a feature that we need to sort of shift left in the design of the human and AI interface design that we try to deliver to our customers. And by that, I mean certain features like, exposing the agent's thought process, lowercase t, the basically reasoning steps needs to be exposed. The reasoning traces, the tools that the agent is calling, and so on and so forth, needs to be exposed so that a user can understand why they got the output that they need, or so that a developer can understand, the failure state, or so that your compliance team can actually understand the audit trail as to why your agent decided to give a free car to a customer.
Okay. So Brian, let's kind of build on the point you're making about how pretty much we all need to kind of understand AI agents, right? What are the practical steps that you recommend for someone who wants to get started and bring agentic AI into their projects?
So the number one step is go for real deep understanding of the technology. And right now for AI agents, though I can't promise this will be true forever, it's understanding how these large language models work, what auto regression means for them, how they come up with tokens, what reasoning is, how they're trained, what data sets they're trained on, because they're not trained on everything, and what techniques you can use to actually incorporate real world data into these technologies. So how do you prompt these things? Actually, prompting is a new coding. No, I'm kidding. I'm not ready to say that yet. But you do have to know. I guess a promise. Here's the interesting thing. The promise is that agentic AI will make this work easier. I actually feel like it adds more things to it. In order to be able to do more, we need to know more. And so not only do we need to know coding, we also need to know prompting. We need to know how to prompt different models, because you don't prompt them all the same. In addition to knowing spreadsheets in SQL, we need to know how to write asynchronous code in Python. We need to know MCP. We need to know a lot more, really, about real-time services than we did before when you were working in the traditional data realm and machine learning. So a lot is changing. And I'd actually say go for real deep understanding of the AI behind it. That's one thing to focus on. And then focus also on the system aspects of it. So a lot of this is building up systems from blocks that people are working on. You can think of them as Lego blocks. And we're still designing a lot of the Lego blocks. That's what's making it hard. A few years from now, it will be easy to take these blocks off a shelf and build a reliable agentic AI system, assuming you have your data sets and your evaluations all set up, which interestingly enough was noted as one of the most difficult things to work on at a recent AI conference. So I'd probably end on that. Learn how to evaluate your agents.
So basically what you guys are both saying is we have a lot to learn and we need to start learning it now. So let's kind of talk about, like, Noah, what's the next frontier for agentic AI that you're most excited about? What you gave us what we need to learn now. What do we need to learn next?
I've got two. One is pithy. I'm excited that we move past chatbots and sort of leverage the latent space and the in-context learning capabilities of at least the generative AI models available today. But one of the other most exciting things is more, I guess I'll call it institutional intelligence. Agents that don't just follow workflows that I advocate for, but also just, at least from an outcome standpoint, helps an organization learn to improve certain business workflows. Again, you'll notice a theme here, like sort of that human AI collaboration thing. Right now, we design the agent's decision tree, right? But imagine agents that observe patterns in their escalations, that identify where processes break down and suggest improvements. There's some tools out in the market today, but I'm very excited to see where that goes. From my GDE perspective, I use a lot of different tools from different vendors, and I see the infrastructure from Amazon or Azure or OCI on Oracle side, even Google's cloud platform coming together with better memory, more sophisticated orchestration, even from companies that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we never heard of, like Llama Index or LangChain, right? So anyway, the real breakthrough is when organizations can stop asking, like, can AI do this, or can my agent do this job, and then shovel a lot of money at it, versus how can AI help us do this job better, as sort of a framing, and just that shift of replacement thinking to more augmentation thinking needs to happen more, and that's what I'm hopefully excited
Okay.
about. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Pretty exciting. Brian, like, what do you see coming the next year, and how do we stay ahead of that?
Yeah. So one thing that's very important to me, and I see coming, is that with all the proliferation of these AI tools that exist, and a lot of them are really fun to work with, um, but also they're making a lot of content that seems the same on the internet. If you look at it, it's like, oh, look at these posts. A lot of them look the same. People are using similar prompts to create these posts and putting them on LinkedIn. Um, and one thing that's so important for so many of us, whatever we happen to be doing in our businesses and our personal lives, is being able to differentiate ourselves, is being able to stay unique and
Yeah.
build value in what you're doing. And you're not going to do that necessarily by using the same tools as everyone else in the same ways. So this gets back to whatever your goals are. You need to know what your goals are and focus on those. We have some really awesome tools that we can use to help us reach those goals, but it's going to require some creativity on your
Yeah.
part to figure out how to use these tools in ways that really help you stand out. And I think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of people. But it's not going to be a challenge for those of us that are thinking about it, because unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people are going to be thinking about how to stay unique when they're just trying to figure out how to use these tools. So one prediction I have is that even though there will be more buying off the shelf, there are going to be some really good products coming out probably. I also think no code prototyping tools are going to allow lots more people to make custom agents to do things in their way that works best for them. And I actually think this is an area that will blow up. And all of us, just like you can use a spreadsheet, you can do data analysis in pandas, but you better know how to use a spreadsheet as well. And the same thing is going to be true with making AI agents. You can make an AI agent using whatever SDK, but can you prototype them quickly using no code tools? I think this is going to be a huge thing coming up in the next year.
Oh, I get that. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I really like the point you're making about how we really have to keep, when we're using these tools, we have to keep ourselves in there. We have to use them in ways that add where we as humans are adding value. I think it's one of the things we talk about here a lot at Udacity. Okay, so this has been awesome. We actually have a bunch of really great questions coming in. So let's dig into some of those. This is a good one. What's the job outlook for agentic AI? Who wants to take that one?
Um, well, if you go by what you're hearing in the news, the job outlook is looking kind of grim, because it's going to replace you. But that's not true. Um, I think I want to echo Brian here, is that in that once you are prepared, once you have as deep as you can go or forward or get access to as far as the knowledge is concerned, um, whatever job that you end up wanting to do, I believe AI has a place to help augment your path to being successful in that role. So it's a very hard question to answer. However, if you want to be a developer, you have these AI agent tools that can help you. As a former product manager, I'm going to give you a hot take on that question and say, if you want to get into software, learn fundamentals of product management, because if these things get smarter, every software engineer, engineering manager essentially becomes a product manager. Why do I say that? Product managers are outcomes thinkers. We use lean analytics to understand the outcomes of things. We use frameworks like jobs to be done to understand the true need that is whatever multiple or order of magnitude better to solve a specific problem than the current status quo. And those, if you get enough iterations on learning what makes a great product manager, I think you will thrive in this agentic world.
Okay. So, Brian, are there any specific AI agent roles? Like, what can somebody's all into AI agents, what kind of jobs should they be looking for? And what's the outlook for those jobs?
Yeah, so I'll repeat some of what Noble was saying. It's hard to predict what's actually going to happen in terms of jobs in the market. Looking at how things are created right now, there's going to be a lot of cleanup needed. I feel like there's a lot of code going out there, and people are working with it in new ways. We're not just writing code; we're writing code that's writing code that's writing
Yeah.
code. This is not simpler, people. This is more complicated than it was before. You have to double down on learning the fundamentals and also learning the product thinking. Those are two very important things. Now, there are actually new things that are popping up. So what sort of new roles? Essentially roles that focus around having these new skill sets. And that is, do you know what an agent is? Do you know how to work with the tools to build agents? Can you prototype them quickly? Can you put them into production? And can they solve business problems? And it's the same thing you would do if you're building other pieces of software, but now it's like we have a new programming language, or we have a new paradigm for programming. But it's the same thing we're trying to solve at the end of the day. We recognize problems, we come up with solutions, we test them, and then we see at the end of the day if it works. That's what we're doing here.
Great. Okay, so this is a really kind of good follow-up question. So, as a student or a learner, will using agentic AI tools help build professional skills, or can it hurt development and make us too dependent on automation? I mean, the reason why this one resonates with me is I grew up reading paper maps, and I don't know if I could read a paper map now because I just use Google Maps all the time. I have become map stupid. Is agentic AI going to make us kind of stupid in some things that might turn out to be important?
I don't know. I'm curious to hear your take, Brian. I don't like the framing of the question, though it is a fascinating
But
question.
don't take my framing, because I think
Yeah.
that the question that came is better than will agentic AI make us stupid. So ignore that part. But yeah,
Yeah,
will,
I mean, if
will
I
it
were
help
to, yeah, go ahead.
make people too dependent on automation?
I think we're humans are always, our mind is wired to work less or to be less to try to our mind is wired to rest more and work less. If you think about how you show up after your commute to work and you don't really remember how you got there, it's just your mind getting used to the muscle memory, or at least things that are repetitive, and then sort of putting you on autopilot of sorts. And if I were to sort of borrow that sort of biological, this poorly articulated biological sort of way that our minds work into how we use tools, we moved from, setting fire with two rocks to lighters, right? We're always going to find more efficient ways to solve our problems. If I were to be philosophical for a second, we shape our tools, and in turns, our tools shape who we are. And this is not my quote. Father Culkin came up with that, professor, I believe, I can't remember where. But if you sort of have that mindset, you can then start thinking about the question differently, which is, how do I adapt to help out my society or help myself out, or create some good in the world through whatever it is I'm doing, rather than fear of being atrophied by the tools that are available. I think that is the wrong framing in how to look at these things.
Okay. Brian, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think it can go both ways. Interestingly enough, there was like a mini outage of a lot of services on the internet yesterday, and some of us found ourselves in the situation of, oh no,
Kind
my
of twitchy, right?
autocomplete isn't working in my IDE. What do I do? Should I take a break or should I just type it out? The thing is, if you've become too dependent on these tools, I think it can go both ways. Like, I personally sometimes turn off the autocomplete. I
Okay.
personally actually write a paragraph out word by word
Pseudocode,
with
right?
misspellings. You might check out a post I put recently on LinkedIn. There's a misspelling in there, and I didn't put that in using AI. That was my own fingers on the keyboard. It's good to be able to sometimes get back to the basics, and you have to train your brain to do these things. You need to get in the trenches, like with the data. You need to actually do things yourself. It's how you actually get an intuitive idea for certain things that are going on. And I actually don't agree with a claim that all these things are mundane. I like writing. I like writing words using a pen, a fountain pen. These are the joys of life. And I think it's good to, I actually enjoy using this new technology as well. So I think there's a way to actually not, um, to keep our brains strong, to continue to learn. And that really means knowing the basics, but also knowing how to use these tools adeptly. And I'm actually excited to see, I do think there's going to be a new generation of people, let's say like musicians, who take these AI tools and use them in ways we never even imagined.
Yeah,
People
I
who
think
are
you're right.
using things in the ways that they weren't even intended, and they're going to come up with some pretty amazing things. And I do think that's cool. So, yeah, please don't let your brain turn to mush. Use your creativity, and take a walk every now and then, and enjoy nature as well.
Good life advice. I appreciate that, Brian. Okay, let's get into kind of some of the nitty gritty of this. We were talking about the importance of data in this. How do we make sure our data is secure with an AI agent?
How do we make sure our data is secure?
Yeah,
I think that I think that remains the same with any data engineering best practice, or data security best practice with any traditional software. I should admit that I'm probably not the best person to talk about data security, though. But I would note that, I guess I'll bring back something that I mentioned before. The more complexity that we add on top of the agentic pipeline in order to get an agent to do the thing reliably, the more vectors of potential attack there is. So the data input is one vector of attack, and the entire pipeline to get your data right. The system input and the system output are also two separate vectors of attack. You, of course, the front end and the guardrails to make sure that people are not sort of trying to prompt inject. That is all. Data permeates the entire pipeline. And so, agents might find creative ways to combine safe data sources that reveal sensitive information, for example. The autopilot thing that I was talking about with humans and how our brains work may translate to agents as well. I always try to find the easiest way to do that. And that obviously may cause some issues, which is why I think from a data security standpoint, employing certain practices like what I mentioned before, shifting explainable AI left to understand the reasoning traces, the tool calling traces, your guardrails and interleaving agent requirements that would allow you to understand traces in order to understand and then allow you to do robust error analysis is important. Robust evaluation, as Brian hinted at earlier as well, every step of the way, either online or offline, I think is important. But I'm curious, Brian, you're more in the trenches than I.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it came up in work recently as we were talking about GitHub has their MCP implementation, and some articles came out saying, oh, there are attack vectors on this. There are attack vectors on everything, but it talks about how specifically there's a weakness there, and it has to do with prompt injection. And if you have, let's say you have an agent running on your computer and it's looking at GitHub tickets, it could look at a GitHub ticket in a public repo, and through a prompt injection, it can control the agent to do things to expose your private repos. And this is all about setting up your systems to follow the principle of least privilege. So the thing is, that's easier to say, and it's harder to do. And it really means even on our systems, we'll have to work better to make different spaces and sandboxes for different agents, which I don't know about you, but I'm not thinking right now about all the different security zones on my laptop for the different agents that are going to be running on it in the future. So that's a complication. Though I think the number one thing are going to be the traditional vectors for security breaks, which is really just the social engineering. Social engineering attacks are the easiest way to get into a system, and you really have to pay close attention to that. It's easier than ever now to get into systems that way.
Yeah, I mean, the phishing emails have gotten so much better, right? I remember back in the day when a phishing email was clearly a phishing email because of the preponderance of typos. Okay, so kind of associated with that, how do we make sure that our deep learning algorithms don't become this black box where the decision making process is difficult to understand? I think that's another kind of fear people have of AI in general and agentic AI specifically. Like, how do we solve that black box problem?
In the future, hopefully, some techniques such as the mechanical interpretation of a model's decision, MECINTERP, I believe it's called. This is a research, hopefully applied research soon, that is being done by Anthropic, Google, Microsoft, some of the big players that can afford to do this. I think will bring transparency and explainability, as I've probably hinted at before, to these sort of larger models. The problem with large language models is, unlike, say, an XGBoost model from back in the day, you don't have access to the inner workings of what's happening. Simpler models, we could, throw a tool like Lime or SHAP against it to understand what was happening. It's harder with deep learning models. And so I would say in the future, interpretable model architectures become a little bit more prevalent. I don't, today, I'm not really sure, but I would say, echo what I said before, having human readable intermediate steps, when you design an agent to show their reasoning, I'm analyzing customer data because you asked about, a retention pattern, for example, and just surface that. You see those patterns today in some of the tools that you use, like ChatGPT, if you're using O3. That's sort of helpful in the short term.
What's your take on that, Brian?
Yeah. Right now, looking at models, if you're talking about chain of thoughts and the way these reasoning models or the other models, if you just ask it to think in steps, they'll go through the steps that they're using to arrive at a solution. And so that is, I think, right now, one of the best ways to see what they're doing inside. Though there's a catch, and the catch is a very big one. And this is what I think will spur on decades of research here, which essentially is if you penalize the model for getting essentially the right answers or tricking the evaluation, and then you try to spot that in its reasoning, they will actually find other ways statistically to get around, to hide their real intention or to hide their reasoning, um, to make it impossible actually to see what they're thinking. And so the black box problem may not be completely solvable. I don't know. This might actually be a big area of research in the future. Is it actually, are we able to tell what's going on in the inside? There are certain things we do know, though, which is not to penalize a model to according to what it has in its reasoning. That will cause the actual quality of the reasoning steps to degrade. I think it's an interesting area of work, and it's one we need to focus on intensely.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to go off camera for a second. My cat was trying to get into the, the room.
Cats are like that, right? Yeah. Get that. Okay, I think we got time for one more question. So how do you define a generative AI engineer, and what's the difference from a machine learning engineer, for example?
Huh. Um, a machine learning engineer, I think these terms, back in the day, it was all machine learning. And then AI, everybody called it AI all of a sudden after generative AI came. I think to answer that directly, a machine learning engineer typically focuses on predictive AI, which can be just, data science techniques like, clustering or classification, or even predictive type model, or even if they're really advanced, started getting to more prescriptive or even causal analysis. And when some machine learning engineers are also on the DevOps side of the house. We call them, I guess, MLEs, that work on the data we were talking about before and the pipelines, and are able to sort of, do exploratory data analysis prototypes or EDA prototypes in order to then, work with an ML developer to do the work. So that's, if I were to use the parlance in the field today, a machine learning developer or engineer is focused more on sort of classic or predictive AI. Okay. Whereas a generative AI engineer is essentially doing the same thing, but focused more on models or data products that help generate new content, generate new artifacts in sort of the classic generative way, or build agents. That is basically a way for you to sort of understand how the system is reasoning through a certain set of objectives and calling tools and the like.
Okay, Brian, anything to add on that?
Yeah, my tongue-in-cheek response is the difference is 2022 and 2025. The year we're in.
That's beautifully put. I wish
I
I
like
said I
that.
thought of that.
That's
Yeah.
good. I like that.
But yeah, essentially, it's really hard to tell. It depends on the use case in the company. And for interviewing, like the interviews will be all over the place. You'll have to know different things depending on who you're interviewing for. But essentially, working at a place, again, you look at the problem that's in front of you and you think of the tools you need. A lot of times you don't need an agent to solve something. If you're trying to predict something, you train a model, you get a percentage, and it's, like I think, this is 90% possible, and this model is tuned and it's trained on all this data. That's something that's been worked on. The statistics behind that has existed for many, many years, and we can do that reliably now. Agents are a new thing, and a lot of the new toolkits are a new thing. I'd say that's one difference, is you do need these extra skills in there to build agents. And that's just because there are new technologies coming out. And everyone in the field needs to know about these new technologies. And you should know a lot of things know a little about a lot of things, and know areas you're very interested in and ones you're going to work in very deeply. And that's going to continue to be true.
Okay, great. Okay, before we go, one last hot take. Just give me a 30-second on kind of what should people watching this webinar go away knowing about Agentic AI? What's like top of mind?
I guess I could go first again. By the way, Brian, you can always jump in. Hot take. I'll say if you're getting into this and you're taking Udacity courses and you now, you go back to work and you want to sort of just build it, don't try to build the ultimate agent on day one. Start simple and lather layers of complexity as you're able to iteratively prove you're furthering towards whatever the goal is. That's number one. Number two is your first I'm sorry, Brian, I'm going to actually steal your evaluation point because I want to just hammer it down. Your first agent will be wrong, and that's fine. The iteration of evaluating, collecting ground truth from experts, or at least SMEs or subject matter experts in that field, and understanding how to just go through an experimentation mindset is very key. And then really quickly, because we love threes, is understand the difference between human in the loop and human on the loop, and you will build human-centered agentic systems that don't suck and that actually helps humanity.
Great. Okay, Brian, what's your hot take? What should people come away with this conversation?
Yeah, I loved all those points. I'll just add one maybe. And this technology, LLMs, AI agents, it's not magic. Don't think of it as magic. Think of it as a science. And as with any type of science, you have ideas, you test your ideas, you get data, you look at the data, and you decide, was I right, was I wrong, and you improve. That's that is the process. And that's one thing. I said I was only going to say one thing. The second thing is, have fun doing it, obviously. Learning is great, continue to learn, and it's a goal in and of itself. So I hope you all enjoy our courses, which are coming out fairly soon.
Awesome. Well, okay, so I want to thank you guys. This was a really fun conversation. And now, I mean, it should be clear to everybody listening why you guys are among our favorite Udacity authors. Not only do you guys have really insightful things to say, but you can explain them to those of us who are kind of grasping this in ways that are super helpful. So I really, really appreciate that. And I want to thank everybody who's listening to this. Thank you so much. And if you're wondering, so like, how do I learn all this stuff? Well, I mean, there's a lot of resources. My good friend ChatGPT is actually pretty interesting. Good, you can have some good conversations with ChatGPT about agents. YouTube, and of course, Udacity has a whole bunch of really great programs for generative AI, LangChain, et cetera, et cetera. So please keep your eye on the Udacity catalog. But really, I think kind of what I think both Brian and Nova were saying is, you really got to you got to get in, you got to do it, you got to try it. So stay curious, stay engaged, and let's keep building the future together. And yeah, so everybody have a great day and have a great weekend.